Hi, I'm Morgan Hines. I'm a senior reporter with PhocusWire, and I'm here in the PhocusWire studio at the Phocuswright conference in Barcelona. I'm happy to be joined by Gaurav Tuli of F Prime and Anna Schneider of Lufthansa Innovation Hub. Welcome. I'm really excited to chat with you guys.
Thank you.
We're going to dive right into funding trends with you two. And before we start, I want to give a little context. We know that 2023 data has shown a pretty significant decrease in travel funding compared to 2022. And also we've seen that 2024 is kind of off to like a little bit of a weak start. So let's talk about that. Why has that funding dip happened?
Mm-hmm. So at Lufthansa Innovation Hub, we keep, a good eye on the startup landscape. We do strategic intelligence ourselves. We put research out there, and we've recently done actually a very deep dive investigation into investment trends in the TMT sector, which means travel and mobility tech. So what we're always looking at is, in the context of venture capital funding, I think there's really three big factors that impact this, right? It's like the macroeconomic environment, macroeconomic uncertainty, geopolitical tensions, right? Then we have, post-pandemic, rise in inflation, rise in the cost of capital, right? And these are, huge limitations to, venture capital and to fundraising, as I see it. I don't know if these are also the factors that you're looking at.
No, absolutely. I mean, we are a technology and healthcare investors, so we see this across the early stage landscape. But I would look at it a little bit differently. What I think has happened is actually we've only reverted back to the levels we were at before a massive run up in the market. And so it feels much more like the healthy venture capital levels of 2018 and 2019. In 2022, at the start of 2022, we went through a massive correction, and that lasted for the next 2 years. And so now I think we're far more looking like a recovery phase than a correction phase. And so what I actually feel, Morgan, is like we're seeing great companies actually get funded now, and we're starting to wash through a lot of the noise and aftermath of the last 2 years, which were very difficult. But some phenomenal companies in travel and outside of travel are getting funded today.
Okay, so what it sounds like you're saying, a recovery phase isn't something that's necessarily a negative, but is this downturn in funding that maybe even is not a correction from a correction phase, but a recovery phase, is that something that you would expect to continue? Do you expect a continued dip? Or are you expecting to see travel tech investments ramp up a little bit? Is it that investors are feeling bullish or emboldened, or are they kind of a little bit more reserved given what you've just said?
Yeah, that's a really good, it's a good question. I can't speak for all, as a travel tech investor, I feel very bullish. But I also felt very bullish a year ago when we were in the midst of, I think, that deep correction. So I think the overall market is more likely to stay subdued, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I actually think that these are really healthy levels for the industry. And as long as good companies can get funded, that's what we all want, right? I think there was a period of time where, entrepreneurs were probably being misled into going longer than needed because the money was available. And that's not always a good thing. There's some unhealthy dynamics that can come from that. And so I feel much better about where we are.
So
actually.
When you say that, you mean that maybe some companies that shouldn't have received funding were because of that kind of frenzy that was happening?
It's a little more of the false illusion of product market fit because you have so much money available to you. So companies that raised and were fighting hard to find product market fit, and the reality is the inherent business model wasn't sufficient to build a long-term sustainable business. And so because the money was there, it made it feel like everything's okay. And then when the money dries away, you're caught with your pants down.
Got it. That makes sense. And that all came kind of on the heels of the pandemic, correct? So we think about that and how that's changed funding over the last few years, and now we're in a phase that sounds like it's more on track with what happened prior to the pandemic. So what factors external from the industry are kind of impacting the way that investors are spending right now? What are you seeing trend-wise that way?
Yeah. I know you look at a lot of early stage stuff. What do you think?
I mean, we've looked at stuff across the board, and I think One of the important points to reiterate, and I think something that you also alluded to, is the fact that the industry pain points are not going away, right? And this is why I think it's always helpful to also have an optimistic eye on the outlook going forward, right? Because there are niches, there are areas where innovation needs to happen, right? I mean, look at the airline space, right? There's a huge need for operational efficiency. Yeah, this is also something that we've seen, you know, in our current research where we looked at corporate investing strategies a lot, right? And I think, you know, currently, yes, corporates are tightening their belts, investors are, you know, tightening their belts to a certain extent. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the need for innovation is going to go away. And as I said, you know, operational efficiency, I think, is really one of those points that is going to become more and more important, right? More automation also means that, you know, you can reduce your costs, right, in the medium to long term. And this, I think, especially in aviation, is like a huge area where I think we're going to see a lot of dynamics, you know, when it comes to these really core functions like, you know, ground ops, maintenance and repair operations, you know, these are really core functions where airlines need to improve. And this is also where we're seeing a lot of activity. And, you know, that's not necessarily, you know, just enforced or enhanced through investments, but it's also happening in-house a lot of the time. Like at Lufthansa Innovation Hub, we also do venture development, yeah, and this is definitely an area where we're also looking to, yeah, provide solutions.
It's a great point, and that's an area we're also, you know, again, really excited about because so much has changed at the surface level in travel. So much has changed with how consumers want to interact with travel providers, and yet the infrastructure hasn't been able to change, and for a lot of good reasons, right? But it hasn't, and some of the great companies we know and love that have been around for decades, it is hard for them to necessarily keep up with the innovation happening on the surface. And so the thesis that we are most excited about is like, how do we bring kind of that modern experience that consumers want, even if you're not a consumer-facing travel startup, how do you bring that experience to the consumer while supporting all of the decades of infrastructure that have been built? And so there's some great companies that are doing that, and that's a very disruptive idea that's happening today, and I think that's really exciting for us.
So when you point to the changes in what consumers are looking for and how they interact with providers, how much of that has to do with generative AI?
So I think this trend has been going on for since the start of the mobile revolution, honestly. So I think generative AI is really important, and actually, at the start, it probably speaks most to some of the things you were talking about, which is like, how do we build operational efficiencies? And so the ways we are seeing generative AI and AI in more broadly deployed successfully has been around like really driving strong workflows and strong operational efficiencies. It will get more and more consumer facing, I think, over time, but I think that the biggest cost challenge that travel providers have is service. And so how do they help streamline that experience and reduce the workflow costs? And like, that's where a lot of the focus has been so far. All that said, like, I love what Google's doing in AI. I love what TripAdvisor has done so far with AI. Like, I'm a really excited user.
Yeah, you mentioned yesterday as well, yeah.
I think that's actually a really great point because especially, you know, thinking about artificial intelligence, not just in the context of generative AI, which is this like new buzzword, right? But thinking about artificial intelligence as like a fundamental hinge that has been used to optimize workflows and optimize processes for a number of years. I mean, in our research, we've also seen that AI and machine learning has been a core investment need, you know, from travel and mobility corporates, and it has been for any number of years, right? And I think obviously generative AI is very new, right? Large language models are very new, and they're extremely exciting in the realm of creating a better consumer experience, right? Creating like conversational interfaces that, you know, work and that, you know, look very high quality, provide high quality information, not 100% reliable, you know, at all times. But I think it's very important to differentiate between the two, right? Artificial intelligence has been around. We're using it, you know, autonomous driving, autonomous vehicles, right? Predictive analytics. And generative AI, I think, has the potential to solve a lot of different pain points, but is not necessarily to be mistaken for, you know, AI in general. Yeah.
I think I don't know what you guys are seeing, but at Lufthansa, but one of the areas I'm most excited about around generative AI is around personalization. And I think the first time I used ChatGPT, it was like, that was the experience. I was like, oh my God, I can tell it I have 2 children, this is their ages, these are the kinds of hotels we like to stay at, and it's going to give me recommendations. Like, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if there's a monetization model in there that's great for a startup necessarily, but there might be. But I love that experience, and I think that personalization experience needs to permeate through a lot of consumer-facing apps over the next 5 to 10 years, and that's great. That's great for all of us. So.
Yeah. So we've talked about kind of changing consumer behavior, technological advances, but what about other external factors? Let's talk about politics, our elections, or global political events making a difference at all in the kinds of investment trends that you're seeing or participating in. There's a lot going on right now.
No, there is. That's a great question. I don't think we've ever let the political landscape influence our investment decisions. The thing that I love about the travel sector is that it is so resilient to lots of changes, both macro as well as geopolitical changes over very long periods of time. So yes, COVID was a really disruptive few years for the industry, and then it bounces back to levels that are higher than we've ever seen before. And it will keep doing that, and it has done that countless times. So whatever the near-term concerns are around elections, and there is a lot going on in the US and Europe, travel as a category is something that consumers want so much, and it seems to always overcome, and that's one of the reasons we like it. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a huge question, and obviously there is an impact, right? Whether it's a direct impact, on the VC or on the funding landscape, there's definitely an impact on operations, right? As an airline group, obviously there is an impact, on the, geopolitical or, by the geopolitical landscape as we see it. And that is tremendously important, but I do agree that I think travel is an especially resilient business. And I think there's also a couple of, positive outcomes of new regulation. Think of the EU AI Act. This is definitely gonna impact like what type of artificial intelligence and especially generative AI startups we're going to see in the future. Think of, the European digital identity, right? Is actually also a development I'm very excited about, right? Sort of like centralizing identity management in a way that makes the consumer experience more seamless. And this is, again, I think an opportunity and a positive opportunity for the travel space as well.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it's all really interesting. So with that in mind and all the expertise that you have, what do you wish startup founders that are looking to raise, what do you wish they knew or understood from an investor's perspective?
I think, speaking more broadly for the VC community, I think it's important for travel tech founders especially to recognize that our industry doesn't have a lot of history of investing in travel tech in particular. So some of the biggest companies, again, Amadeus, Sabre, Expedia, Booking, like these were not venture funded businesses. And so Airbnb was probably one of the, and I guess Kayak to some degree as well, but Airbnb and Kayak were like the first ones that woke people up to being like, oh wow, this is a sector that can generate a lot of returns for financial investors. So I think what that means is that there's more of an education process. And so this is a really complex industry. It may seem like the total addressable market is $11 trillion, but it's not really, when it comes down to it. So I would say when you approach venture capitalists, like understand their baseline, which is certainly not the same level as someone who's been in the industry for decades. Because again, we don't have a lot of experience. There is some trepidation historically. I think there are a number of VCs that are active in the space and pushing through that, but like it's a newer sector, I would say, for venture capitalists. So that's one is like, make sure you help educate. And then second, like recognize whether you truly need venture capital or not. Like I think that is a fundamental question that like entrepreneurs should be asking themselves, whether they're in travel or not, but especially in travel where the horizons tend to be longer, and unlocking customers can also be longer, especially if you're B2B. And so, venture has a shorter time horizon, and the returns required are significant. So again, like think about if it's a good fit and why it might be a good fit.
Got it. And one final thing as we kind of wrap up here, what is the single biggest trend for the next year that both of you see in terms of investments?
I'll let you go first.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely it's AI and
I guess that was an easy one.
Well, yeah, but in a few different ways. And so, one, we're very excited about like net new native AI startups and what they're doing, both in travel and outside of travel. But I'm really excited about what we're seeing in travel. But I'm also really excited about what our companies that were founded 3 to 4 years before generative AI became a thing, what they are able to do now with some of the new tools that are available to them. Because one of the really cool and unique things about the travel industry is that, for startups especially, is that they end up with this big distribution advantage. So like, let's say you're selling to airlines or you're selling to hotels. These are not it's very different than selling to a financial institution. So financial institutions are happy to buy from 200 to 1,000 vendors. They want the best of breed of every single little thing that they buy. In a hotel, for example, is like, if you sell them one thing and they love it, they will buy everything from you. They're like, please tell me what else you have. And that's an awesome thing if you're a startup. And so there's big distribution advantages. So once you have 20,000 hotels, 50,000 hotels, every net new product you build or thing that you can layer on, your customers are so excited to try it because they trust you. And I think that's that's why we're really excited about AI.
Makes sense, yeah. I mean, AI is obviously a hugely exciting realm, and I think everyone's sort of, first idea. I think also like looking at, the startups pitching today during the different sessions, like a lot of them do something very innovative with AI or generative AI, which I think is cool. But I think it's also important to kind of understand the core need behind the adoption of AI and also behind the adoption of generative AI, right? And a lot of that is around automation. Again, kind of going back, drawing the line to operational efficiency, right? Which is a core need. It's not going away, as I already said. So I think sort of seeing AI in that context is really, really important. But I'm also very excited about like the convergence of artificial intelligence or generative AI with other technologies. For example, immersive technology. I don't know if you're excited about it, but I am, because I do think that there's like a lot of use cases out there where you can utilize immersive technology and you can connect it to generative AI, for example, for the realm of augmented, maintenance solutions, for example, but also for things like travel inspiration, right? I think there's, a huge overlap, and I'm very excited to see startups, explore this realm a bit more.
Awesome.
That's great examples.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. It was such a pleasure, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.